Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. I'm really excited about today because we're going to be talking about love and risk. We could have said love and hate, but we didn't. We said love and risk, nonprofit finance. What are those things that might be red flags or red roses? I was talking with Nicole Frisina, one of the managers over at YPTC, and welcome, by the way. We were chatting in the green room accountants and bookkeepers and people in finance get a bum rap because we always think they're not fun and they're not creative. Right. But you came forward with this idea of let's talk about the things that you can love and the things that maybe you don't love or you should be worried about. And I love that you came up with this. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Julia. Welcome. Welcome to be here. Happy to be here.
It's going to be really fun because the things that we love about our organizations or that we should be concerned about, we're going to kind of give a quick primer on that. And I think this is the right time of year, Nicole, to kind of delve into this while we can make some changes. You know, one of the things that we never want to change on the Nonprofit Show are our presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, our new shows, or I should say episodes on Fridays just dedicated to fundraising. Your Part-Time Controller, where Nicole joins us from today, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I have this super cool group of co-hosts. They come from all over the country. They do all different things for the nonprofit sector exclusively. And I'm just delighted that we have assembled this like a stellar group of people to join us. But I'm even more excited to get Nicole Frisina on. She is a manager with Your Part-Time Controller, coming to us from the New York area. Okay, my new friend, why the nonprofit sector? What drove you to these two wacky things, finance, accounting, and nonprofits?
No, it's great that you asked me that, Julia. So I've always loved accounting. That has always been my passion. It's always something that I've enjoyed, like growing up and when I went to college and everything. It was always about accounting. And then I found YPTC with nonprofits, and it's amazing to work with nonprofits. You just get to know them. They're serving their communities. They're doing something for a bigger purpose. So I still get to do what I love, accounting. I'm an accounting nerd in and out, but I get to help nonprofits, right? I get to help them with their communities, with their space, with just like seeing them. And the people who work for nonprofits, they're amazing. I just absolutely love them. And they're just such a warm, empathetic set of people.
Yeah. You know, I love that you said that because I think sometimes we don't hear that enough, and we need that reinforcement, right?
Yeah.
And then I think we blend this with the reality of, and I'll call it out, you know, most people are terrified of the finance department. When you walk into any, you know, campus where there is a finance department working on site, and they always have the crappiest offices, they're pushed to the back, you know. I mean, they're not glorified, you know, in the work that they do, and yet they should be, right?
Absolutely. I started off my career as an auditor. So we were always in that space of being scary, you know, here comes the auditors. And it was never like this great, you know, outlook of things. And so being with like YPTC and being able to work with nonprofits, and not just with the executive directors, but with the whole team, with their development team, their program people, everybody, like it's truly like a collaborative effort. And so finance shouldn't have this like glass shield, you know, it shouldn't be like we're like in this corner. Like it's very much an integral part of making a nonprofit do well.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you said that, that, you know, holistically, you know, the finance team should be working with all the different departments, because to me, when I observe nonprofits, that's generally not the case, because there's fear, because there, like you said, there's some glass walls that are, you know, put up, and then it doesn't help. You know, you can't do your job well in fund development if you don't know what's going on and what the numbers are. And you know, it sounds like a broken record, but it's really a critical relationship that you have to foster. And I just think that, man, we don't of all the different departments that have to integrate and work together, this is one that we don't do well with. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm preaching to the choir. I just got to say.
Definitely are. Definitely are.
Well, let's get on to preaching about the things that maybe we shouldn't love or we don't love, but that there are red flags as opposed to red roses.
Mhm.
And this is one of the things that I learned early on from your founder Eric Fraint. He started talking about this when I first met him years and years ago, and certainly Jennifer Leva, your CEO. Lack of segregation of duties and board oversight. What does that look like?
Yeah. So one thing that we see a lot is some nonprofits are small. So they only have maybe one or two people, not even maybe just one person in their finance department. They're kind of doing everything. And so if that person is signing the checks, they're entering the invoices, they're approving the invoices, that creates a very high risk of fraud. And right, we don't want to think about that. Again, we're nonprofits, we're a very loving community, but still you want to make sure you're having the segregation of duties. It's so important to have some level of oversight happening. And so kind of tying into that board oversight, can your board chair or your treasurer be a second signer, not just the executive director? Or if, let's say, the executive director has some business reimbursements, can that treasurer be the person to sign, review those invoices, approve them? Because again, it's just another level of oversight that you're able to provide. And we see that a lot, especially when you're on the smaller side of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that you tagged in to size
Yeah.
because I think that's important. I think a lot of times you can look at this and say, oh, well, that's only for a larger organization that's got lots of people. But I loved how you pull this into the board structure. And yeah, I think it's super, super important. And I love that that's kind of the starting point of this conversation. Another thing I want to ask you about is another red flag. And we were talking about this in the green room. This is going to become more and more of a preeminent concern for the nonprofit sector, and that's restricted funding and revenue diversity. We chase the buck, it's the
Right.
natural thing, and then we don't diversify like we should until we realize it's too late. Talk to us about what you're seeing or what we should be looking at.
Absolutely. So, with revenue diversity, one thing that we're seeing is nonprofits rely on sometimes one type of revenue stream. A great example is, let's say, using like a performing arts organization. Like their revenue stream is their performances and selling their tickets, but it think about the pandemic, bringing it back to COVID when things shut down. Performing arts organizations, they struggled because that was the only revenue stream. We can't ignore the political climate we're in right now and what might be happening with federal funding and government funding. And so if majority of your resources are coming from that type of area, you have to start getting creative now. Like start thinking about and strategizing what can you do to help your organization sustain through whatever might be coming over these next few years. If you own your building, like a great example is, do you own a building? Can you rent it out? Like, is that an option? Or do you have space where maybe you could rent it out and do something fun with it? If it's, again, like going to performing arts, maybe is there like a store, like an online store you can sell some materials, sell some like logos and things like that. There's so many options that you could possibly think about. Another is a line of credit. This is the time if you are in a healthy position, get a line of credit that'll help you weather that storm of potential, dried up funding or something. Or seek out other type of resources, other corporation foundations, individuals. I know it's what we're doing, right? We're always chasing that dollar, but you have to just try to really can't put all your eggs in one basket, right? We always say that. And especially with nonprofits, it's something we have to be super mindful about.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I think that's a lot of times we look at things and the resources that we the things that we have are the things that we work with, and we don't realize that they're resources.
Right.
Intellectual property, you can sell your programming. If you have created manuals and structures and you have data, and you have paths that will lead some other organization in another part of this country or world, that has value.
Mhm.
Just like in arts organizations, you can rent your sets, you can rent your costumes,
Exactly.
you can rent your performers. I mean, it's an interesting time to look at what values you have, and you might have to be a little creative and think outside the box. But I think you're absolutely right. This
Right.
is the time to be looking at that, before you're wringing your hands.
Absolutely.
Because that's frightening. No one wants to be in that position.
No, and you don't want to be. And so that's where it's really important that you are starting to think about what can you do for the future. Start looking at 5 years out. Have that like sort of
Mm.
strategy. It's already 5 years that we're outside of COVID, which is crazy to think about. So here we go. Here we go. It's like, what's your next 5-year plan? What is the plan that you're going to do to help the organization?
Yeah. I love that you put it that way. That's really brilliant because it kind of brings it all home, doesn't it? I
Yeah,
think that's great. Thank you for kind of putting that into context. Let's talk
absolutely.
about one of my favorite things that people get really bummed about, but the IRS 990
Yeah.
failure to file on time.
Yeah, we don't. So the 990, as we all know, is that informational return. We were talking about it before. It's the brochure for your organization. It tells you everything about it. And it's such a great way to help get that additional funding we were speaking about. But it's so important to do it timely. So based on your fiscal year end, it's due 5.5 months after your fiscal year end. Let's using our December year end clients. May 15th would be your first deadline. You can extend it for 6 months. So theoretically, that would be November 15th if you were a December year end client. But it's really important you get them done on time. You don't want to have to be waiting on November 14th and like rushing around to sign that and get it in. If it is filed late, you could get penalties from the IRS. I have seen it happen. And that's the last thing you want. But what I've also seen is organizations years behind on their audits. And that is even a scarier fact that we want. If you are more than 3 years that you have not filed your 990, you will lose your 501c3 status. And it's really difficult to get it back. You have to get lawyers involved. It can get very expensive. And that is something you don't want. We recommend you work with your auditors or who is preparing your 990 to just understand like, what is possible if let's say you're in this like huge mess and cleanup and things are behind and there's reasons why you're that far behind, but you have to get those filed on time because if you don't have a 501c3, then you can't perform. You can't do what you're meant to do for your community. And that's
Right.
even scarier.
Well, and I think, Nicole, there's so many times, and we will never know, but that outside interests from funders to potential board members to sponsors, I mean, I could go on and on, even potential employees, they
Right.
go online and they look at those 990s. I
Yeah.
know in the American Nonprofit Academy website, we have a portal that takes you right into that, and you can research, any group you want. And that's why I think of them as a brochure. I
Yeah.
think when you change your mind about how this is going to be used, you approach it differently, right?
Right.
As opposed to the drudgery of it and like one more damn form I got to fill out. You can be like, whoa, this is an opportunity
Yeah.
because this might drive something really exciting back to our organization. So,
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Okay, so we've talked about the red flags and we've, really looked at kind of the I don't want to use the word negative, but the things that may be a little bit troublesome.
Yep.
Let's go to honoring Valentine's Day, the red roses, the bunch of things that we love that are making us successful, timely and accurate financial reporting. Woof,
Yes.
that's
It's
hard.
It's hard. I know it's hard. And this is like our number one deliverable we do for our clients is timely and accurate financial reporting. But it's so important. And what's timely? You should be getting a monthly financial statement. So that financial statement is your statement of financial position, your statement of activities, your cash flow, maybe even a rolling forecast, that strategizing of what your year is going to look like on a monthly basis. There is no reason you shouldn't get it less than monthly. We do have some who say, "Oh, I only need it quarterly. It doesn't matter so much." It does. Like, you just never know what might happen, and so it's really important that you're looking at this on a monthly basis, and you try to get it done within like the 2 or 3 weeks after your month end. Like, 2 weeks is very ideal, but again, I know in nonprofits, we don't operate like, let's say, a corporate structure where it's like done, like, 4 days after the month end, not even a day close. But from, 2 weeks is really ideal of like when you should be getting these done. And when we see that, I give red roses out. That's where I'm like, oh, I love seeing this. Like, I know that they're looking at it and accurate. It's not just doing the bank recs, and I know that we'll talk about that in a second, but it's also like, are you looking at your accounts receivable? Are you looking at your accounts payable? Are you looking at your restricted assets? Speaking about the revenue diversity earlier and restricted funding, are you looking at that on a monthly basis as well? Because those all play a factor in putting those reports together.
Nicole, you said something really interesting right out the gate when we started chatting this morning, and that is that your finance teams need to be able to communicate and integrate their information and their wisdom with the different groups. And especially, I'm thinking fund development. Man, you don't want to get behind the 8 ball to where people walk because they're like, we can't catch up, or we're going to miss our targets, or we're so frustrated. This is too big of a mountain to climb. I could go on and on and on. We've all heard it. We've pretty much all said it.
Yeah.
It seems to me, Nicole, that if we're doing these monthly reconciliations, we might not get the news that we want,
Yeah.
but it's not so overwhelming. Is that fair to say?
It is fair to say. It is. And you bring up a good point too, where if finance and a development are not talking, that creates a bigger problem, because finance could put together their financials and have one idea of numbers, right? They may know the expenses, but if they don't know the revenue, and let's say we're overstating revenue, we're making it higher, and in actuality, it's actually less than what we think. Well, there's a huge deficit that we weren't anticipating. And it could be the other way too. It could be in the positive, let's
Yeah.
not look at it from a negative. It could be in the positive, like we have one idea, but maybe there are other grants that have come in and finance is not aware of it. That plays such a huge factor in what we're doing. So that's why it's so important that there is collaboration and discussions amongst all of the departments within a nonprofit organization.
Yeah. I agree with you. And it's just fascinating to see how stressful, or I don't want to use the word combative, but how these two groups don't work in harmony together. And I think that's just such a frightening thing. So I love that is a red rose. You want to get that information, good to go.
Yeah.
This is another thing I'm really interested that you bring up, and another red rose. You love seeing this when you have an organization that has a healthy reserve with 6 months of cash flow. I love that you put a number on this. So talk to us about this.
Absolutely. So a healthy reserve is you have 6 months of liquid cash flow. So it's important that it's liquid, meaning is it in like a money market account where you can easily pull it if you need to? Or is it in like some stocks, maybe, again, where it's not too hard to sell them and you can easily get that money within a day or two? But 6 months, it really just, again, helps you sort of set the structure of, if an emergency happens, right? Things do happen. There's those days where, those rainy day funds and having 6 months allows you to have some of that bandwidth to kind of figure things out if, let's say, you needed to. And so when we see that somebody has it, it's great. Like, again, do they have the line of credit? A great time to get that line of credit is when things are in a good place,
Right.
not when you're in that emergency, because then it becomes really hard to get a line of credit. So if you are in a better place with this healthy reserve, get the line of credit, have it there so that if the time comes, again, it's about managing your risk, but if the time comes, you can pull from it when needed.
Okay, I'm going to ask another question, kind of drill down question on this.
Absolutely.
Two questions. One, would this 6-month reserve vary depending on the size and the age of the organization, or do you feel like this is just a good baseline for everybody?
It's a great question, Julia. I would say it could vary based on the size of the organization. Like, I do think the larger the organization, you may want, a different a pool of money.
Okay.
But 6 months is generally a good baseline. I typically we might say 3 to 6. I feel like 3 is not enough, because
Okay.
if the sky is falling, 3 months is still not enough time for you to be able to find those
Yeah.
other revenue streams. It takes time to, from a donor, even from a donor point of view, I know I'm talking from just accounting and numbers, but even from a donor point of view, when you're on development, it takes time to cultivate those relationships. It's not going to take 3 months. It might take 6 months. It might even take longer, but at least it's like, it just gives you a longer runway to play with, in my opinion. And again,
Yeah.
everybody may have their own way of thinking about it. I tend to be more conservative, and that's just always been my personality. But I feel like 6 months is a better baseline to hold yourself at.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you giving us another way to look at that. For the organization, and again, no matter what size, how long will it take to build up those reserves? And I know that's like a huge question, open ended, but is
Yeah.
this the sort of thing that should go into our strategic plan, and it might take us, a couple years? I mean, because this is a really, for some organizations, they're just like, they're working with the wolves at the door, as they say, right?
Yeah.
They're what do you advise somebody on this?
Yeah. I would definitely put it in a strategic plan. That's a great point. So when you're starting to talk about what is your 5-year plan, it depends. Again, that does depend on the size of the organization. The smaller the organization, it could take years to get to that point. And we all know that it's not that easy to just find 6 months of reserves. And I know we all know that. But if you start, you have to have a plan for it. There's a phrase we use sometimes in YPTC: if you plan to, or you fail to plan, then plan to fail.
Right.
Because you are not setting yourself up. So that's where you have to have this already, an idea of like, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Is it other revenue streams of like funding, foundations or corporations or individuals? Or is it, maybe we can start renting out space? How does that look? Maybe you have to set things up first before you're able to do that, to help build up those reserves. Or start even saying maybe a certain percentage of things that
Yeah.
come in can go towards the reserve, so that you do build it up over time. And it still allows you to sort of meet that baseline, or, that balanced budget we like to talk about too. But there's so many ways to think about it, but you have to do it as part of your strategic plan. It can't just be, oh, let me just tomorrow pull together 6 months of funding. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't happen that way. It doesn't.
No. No, it doesn't. And then again, to your point, when you're in a stressful period, and stressful periods come,
Yeah.
then you're not able to protect your organization. Let's move on to the monthly issue of bank and credit card reconciliation. So many organizations, because of changing ways that we behave, work from home, work from anywhere, I mean, distributed workforces, we're using debit cards, credit cards. What does this look like? Because this is like tagging into that monthly reporting.
Yep.
But what do you see here?
Absolutely. So doing a monthly bank rec, you have to look at, what's coming in your bank account. Does it compare to what you have recorded in your general ledger system? But what's important with that is you're looking at, does anything seem unusual? Were there large charges that you weren't expecting? Maybe even small charges that don't seem like there's something that, would be normal for you. But what I also try to tell people is not just doing the reconciliations, but if somebody else looking at it, the executive director should maybe look at it on a monthly basis. And if it's not the executive director, maybe the board treasurer should be looking at it. That is such a great policy to have in place, is having another oversight. It shouldn't just be your director of finance or your office manager, whomever might be doing your bank reconciliations. You need to have somebody looking at it. Credit cards too, playing into that. It's the same thing. Debit cards, credit cards, you could have them being passed out to multiple people within the organization. Anybody could be using it. So it's really important that you're looking at what charges are going on there. And if it's that same person doing that, there's that fraud alert, there's that fraud risk again, because you can have somebody doing things on the credit card. If nobody's paying attention to it, they can easily be racking up the charges, and you're paying for stuff that might not be related to your organization. And we don't, you don't want that. So that's why it's important to not just do the monthly reconciliations, but have somebody review it outside of the finance department. You don't have to know accounting to do that. You don't have to know, you don't have to, you just have to know the organization. You just have to know, what are we doing? We are a performing arts organization. So I should see maybe plane tickets or bus travel or, whatever the case might be. That is my programming activities that I should see on here. Those are the charges that I should see. And money coming in, it's coming in from venues, it's coming in from, it doesn't have to be this, I don't know anything about accounting. It's not accounting. It's just very basic. What are the ins and outs that you're expecting the organization to have?
I love that you said that, because to me, that almost like breaks down some barriers with this fear that we often have with our finance departments. And I think that's just a great way to navigate some, relationships or processes. Man, I'll tell you, Nicole, just even with, the nonprofit show and my company, the American Nonprofit Academy, we have moved to so many digital platforms and digital providers, and it's just like these monthly subscription hits to our accounts that you might be like, oh, $9.99, that's not much, but that adds up. And it's like, okay, wait, what is this subscription to some wackadoo thing that it's really important or not, right? And so I think that was really an interesting comment. You don't have to be an accounting whiz to take a hold of that. That's smart.
And it's good to have healthy skepticism. Again, nonprofits, we're loving, empathetic people, but you have to have healthy skepticism. You have to still have that. Just think about it. Like, even though you may not, think it could be anything, it's okay to ask the question. It's like, what is this? And if you're not sure, it just teaches you something else that maybe you didn't realize, and it is something that's needed. But it's okay to walk in with that.
I love it. Well, our time is almost up, but I want to talk about one last red rose, and that's documented financial policies and procedures. This is kind of an interesting thing that I wouldn't have thought maybe is in part of that bouquet of success. What does this look like to you?
Yes, documented policy and procedure. So you are writing down how you are doing your processes, and not just in accounting. I mean, we're talking about it from an accounting point of view, but it's even everywhere in your organization. But keeping it with accounting is, how do you run accounts payable? Who is doing what step in that process? How are you processing, who's depositing checks and accounts receivable? Who is doing what? Payroll. Who's reviewing payroll? Who determines, what their salary is going to be? Who puts in changes for their 401k or benefits or things like that? But it's important to have that documented, and it's more to help. We have something at YPTC we call the win the lottery rule. You win the lottery, you don't want to work anymore. You want to go live off your life, traveling the world. but you have to have some breadcrumbs behind you. And that documented policy and procedures are those breadcrumbs, because if somebody needed to come in and take it over, there's a roadmap right there for you to put it out.
I love it. Well, Nicole Frisina, we won the lottery with you today on the Nonprofit Show. I'm just delighted that you came on. I loved your point of view. I mean, right out the gate, I knew you were going to be a fabulous guest, because the way you said, let's talk about this in terms of red flags versus red roses for Valentine's week. So amazing conversation today. Nicole Frisina, manager at your part-time controller. Our friends over at YPTC.com are amazing. You can learn a lot from them. They have a really robust website. And you don't have to be one of their clients to access their thought leadership. They have amazing information, amazing videos. You can even find episodes of the Nonprofit Show archived within their site. So check them out, yptc.com. That's just a wealth.
Can I interrupt you for one quick second, because you're talking about our resources? So we have a national webinar coming up next week talking about this, ironically. So please do check it out. It's on February 19th, and you can register for it on our website.
Awesome. I love that you brought that up. Thank you. Yeah. You know, as we've learned today from you, any information is good information.
Yep.
You want to be able to be prepared and navigate, you know, in a thoughtful way, as opposed to just reacting to something negative. So thank you, Nicole, for alerting this. We'll check it out. Absolutely. Hey, everybody, we have these amazing partners, and your part-time controller is one of them. They're one of our very first sponsors that came on in the very beginning. But we also have Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that join us day in and day out. Now more than 1,200 episodes, and we're moving into our 6th year of broadcasting in just a few weeks. So we are very, very grateful. Okay, Nicole, go back out there and build that bouquet of accounting and finance red roses.
I will. Thank you, Julia. This was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It was a lot of fun. Hey, everybody, we end each and every episode of the Nonprofit Show with this mantra, and it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone.